Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. This time, we're heading to North Africa, early 20th century. Get ready for a story you might not know, but one that's seriously captivating. It's all about the Rif War, led by a figure who, well, he was part scholar, part military genius, and completely devoted to resistance. Abd el-Krim.
A fascinating figure.
Absolutely. And we've got this amazing YouTube video transcript, all in Arabic, that goes deep into the whole thing.
It's one of those events that often gets, I don't know, maybe overshadowed in the history books.
Yeah.
But the Rif War, crucial. You really can't understand how colonialism played out in the early 20th century without it, or how even seemingly small pockets of resistance can shake things up big.
Exactly. David versus Goliath stuff, really. So let's set the stage. Morocco in the early 1900s. Not exactly a peaceful time, right?
Oh, no, not at all. Picture this. You've got a weakening sultanate trying to hold on to power. Then you have the Rif region up in the mountains. They're kind of doing their own thing, this almost like semi-autonomous vibe. And then bam, France and Spain show up, and they're not there for sightseeing. They're hungry to carve up Morocco for themselves.
Talk about a recipe for conflict.
It really was. You've got the Anglo-French Entente Cordiale, that was 1904, basically giving France the green light to muscle in. And of course, Spain wasn't going to just sit back and watch. Then they make it official. 1906, the Algeciras Conference. They basically just divided Morocco into zones they could control.
Like a game of Risk.
Yeah, exactly. So fast forward to 1912. France establishes its protectorate over Morocco with the Treaty of Fez, and boom, resistance movements start popping up everywhere.
Right. Figures like Ahmed al-Hiba and Ahmed al-Rasuni really set the stage for what was to come.
Exactly. And that's where Abd el-Krim enters the scene. Born in 1882, right in the heart of the Amazigh region. His story is anything but ordinary.
Yeah, his background is fascinating. His father was this prominent tribal leader and judge, really emphasized education. So Abd el-Krim ends up studying Islamic jurisprudence at the Al-Qarawiyyin University in Fes, but he also gets a modern education in Spanish institutions.
And that's so key. This blend of traditional Islamic learning with modern knowledge gave him a unique perspective. He understood his own culture and the workings of those European systems.
Yeah, that's going to be huge later on. But it's not just book smarts with him. I mean, he becomes a teacher, a journalist, even a judge. Clearly a man of action, too.
Absolutely. He wasn't some isolated figure up in the mountains. Abd el-Krim was engaged with the world, already advocating for his people way before the war started. But then, in 1920, tragedy strikes. Abd el-Krim's father dies, and many believed he was poisoned by Spanish authorities.
Wow. Whether it's true or not, that event was a turning point for Abd el-Krim. Fueled his determination to resist colonial rule, to fight for his people's freedom. Talk about a powerful motivator.
No question. It shifted him from this respected intellectual into a symbol of resistance against oppression, and it set the stage for what was to come. A war that would shock the world and challenge the very foundations of colonial power.
And that's where we'll pick up next time, right? The Rif War itself and how Abd el-Krim, with this incredible mix of knowledge and experience, took on two major European powers.
So picture this. You have Abd el-Krim burning with this deep sense of injustice, ready to take on the Spanish, but he knew going head-to-head with their military, that'd be suicide.
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone well at all.
Right. He needed a different strategy. And thank goodness, because the Rif region, it's not exactly known for wide open battlefields, is it?
It's pretty much the opposite, right? All those rugged mountains and valleys.
Exactly. Perfect terrain for guerrilla warfare. And that's precisely what Abd el-Krim chose. He knew those mountains like the back of his hand.
Home field advantage.
Huge advantage. His fighters were fast, adaptable, they'd strike hard and then vanish, leaving the Spanish completely confused and honestly pretty frustrated.
I can only imagine. That must have led to some incredible victories.
Oh yeah, some seriously impressive wins. Take the Battle of Annual, for example, 1921. Abd el-Krim's forces absolutely crushed the Spanish. I mean, we're talking the Spanish general committing suicide, 15,000 Spanish casualties, 700 prisoners.
700 prisoners? That's insane.
It sent shockwaves through Europe. Imagine the headlines. These backward tribesmen from the Rif Mountains taking down a major European power. It totally emboldened resistance movements all over. But Abd el-Krim didn't stop there. He used this incredible momentum to do something seriously audacious.
Let me guess. He declared independence.
You got it. The Rif Republic. Established in 1921, This wasn't just some temporary hideout in the mountains. He was building a nation.
So a fully functioning independent republic. Pretty bold move.
He had this vision, modern independent state, right there in the heart of colonial Morocco. They even drafted a constitution, set up an elected assembly, made Arabic and Berber the official languages.
Wow. So what was his vision for this republic? Was he trying to go back in time or create something totally new?
Abdelkrim was all about progress. He knew that to be truly independent, you needed more than just military victories. You needed a just and equitable society. He pushed for modernization and reform, got rid of some outdated social customs, implemented Islamic law, redistributed land to people who could actually farm it, even worked to ensure fairer water allocation between the tribes.
Sounds like he was building from the ground up, not just fighting a war, but actually building a nation.
Exactly. But all this success, it didn't go unnoticed. Abdelkrim's victories, especially the creation of the Republic, really alarmed the French.
I bet. They must have been worried about copycats, right? Other colonies getting ideas?
Of course. They had this vast colonial empire in North Africa, and they couldn't risk other resistance movements taking inspiration from Abdelkrim. So what did they do? They teamed up with Spain in 1925, launched a massive offensive against the Rif Republic.
Ah, so it's not just Spain anymore. Now France is joining the party.
Yep, a joint effort to crush the rebellion. And, well, that's where things take a really dark turn.
What happened?
The Spanish. Desperate to win, to put down the rebellion, they resorted to using chemical weapons against the Rifians.
No way. Chemical weapons.
It was a brutal tactic. Devastating. Even today, there are reports of high cancer rates in the Rif region, potentially linked to those chemical weapons.
Okay.
A truly awful legacy. Really shows how far those colonial powers were willing to go.
So Abdelkrim's up against it now, fighting a war on multiple fronts, against this powerful enemy and against these horrific tactics.
He was. And in 1926, facing impossible odds, wanting to protect his people from further suffering, he made the heartbreaking decision to surrender. He chose exile over more bloodshed.
A leader putting his people first. That must have been a terribly difficult choice. What happened to Abdelkrim after that?
He was exiled to Reunion Island, and later on he found refuge in Egypt. But even in exile, he never stopped advocating for Moroccan independence, right up until his death in 1963.
Wow, what a story. A leader who united his people, defied empires, dared to dream of a different future, but ultimately forced from his homeland.
It's a tragic end to a remarkable chapter. But the story doesn't end there. The Rif War, even though Abdelkrim faced defeat, it left a deep impact on everyone involved. We're talking heavy losses on all sides. An estimated 30,000 Rifians dead, many of them civilians. Tens of thousands of casualties for the Spanish and the French.
Those are huge numbers.
Okay.
And, of course, the use of chemical weapons that left behind a toxic legacy for generations.
Absolutely. And it forced those European powers to start asking some tough questions. Was holding on to their empires really worth it? Especially when facing such strong resistance.
So the Rif War wasn't just some footnote in history. It had these huge ripple effects that impacted everyone involved.
Exactly. And its legacy is still felt today. The use of chemical weapons, the questions of historical memory, the struggle for recognition of the sacrifices made by the Rifians, it's all still being grappled with today.
It's almost like a hidden history waiting to be uncovered.
But thankfully, in recent years, there's been this growing movement to acknowledge and understand the Rif War. Researchers, historians, activists, they're working to bring the truth to light, remember the victims, and make sure that those sacrifices aren't forgotten.
It's about time. Abdelkrim was an amazing leader, a brilliant strategist, a true champion for his people.
His story reminds us that resistance can take many forms: military, political, social. But at its heart, it's about that unwavering determination to fight for freedom and justice, no matter the odds.
So what can we take away from all of this? Why does the Rif War still matter today?
It reminds us that history is full of these incredible, often forgotten stories of resistance. We tend to focus on the big events, the world wars, the revolutions, but it's in these smaller, localized conflicts where we often see the real human cost of colonialism and the courage of those who resisted.
It's a powerful reminder that even in defeat, the fight for freedom can have a lasting impact, and that these stories deserve to be heard. Makes you wonder what might have happened if things went differently, you know? Like, what if the Rif Republic had actually survived? What kind of impact would that have had?
It's a huge what if in history.
I mean,
Imagine that. A successful anti-colonial state right there in North Africa back in the 1920s. Who knows what could have happened? Could have changed everything. maybe emboldened other independence movements, shifted the whole dynamic between Europe and the colonies?
It's crazy to think about. Even though it was short-lived, the Rif Republic, it still became this powerful symbol, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It gave hope to other anti-colonial movements, not just in North Africa, but all over. People saw that, hey, even a small group with limited resources, they could stand up to an empire and make them pay a price.
Speaking of price, this war, it really took a toll on Spain and France, didn't it?
It did. I mean, think about the numbers. Spain, they lost something like 43,500 soldiers. That's a devastating loss, especially for a country that was already struggling. And France, their casualties were lower, but it was still a significant blow.
And those were just the immediate casualties, right? We can't forget about the chemical weapons, the long-term impact on the environment and the people.
Right. Those numbers, they represent real people, families torn apart, lives cut short, all for a colonial war that ultimately failed.
It makes you think, what was the point of it all? It seems like the Rif War really forced these European powers to take a hard look at their empires, made them question whether it was really worth it, all that bloodshed.
Yeah, especially when they were facing this kind of resistance, this level of determination. The cost was high, maybe too high.
So the Rif War, it's not just a footnote in history. It's this event with ripple effects that touched everyone involved.
Absolutely. And it's still relevant today. The use of chemical weapons, the questions about how we remember history, the ongoing struggle of the Rifians for recognition, these are all issues we're still dealing with.
It's almost like a piece of history that was hidden for so long, and now it's finally coming to light.
Exactly. And thankfully, people are starting to pay attention. Researchers, historians, activists, they're all working to bring the truth to light, to make sure those sacrifices are never forgotten.
It's about time. Abdelkrim was a visionary, a brilliant strategist, a true leader who fought for his people.
His story is a reminder that resistance can take many forms. It can be on the battlefield, it can be in the political arena, it can be social.
Yeah.
But at its core, it's about this unwavering determination to fight for what's right, for freedom, for justice.
Even when the odds are stacked against you. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the big takeaway here? Why should we care about the Rif War?
I think it's a powerful reminder to dig deeper into history, to look beyond the simple narratives, to find those incredible stories of courage and resilience that we often overlook.
Abdelkrim's story is definitely one of them. Even though he faced defeat, his courage and vision, they continue to inspire people today.
It shows us that even when you're facing impossible odds, the human spirit can overcome so much. And the fight for justice, it's always worth it.
Well, this has been a fascinating journey. I learned so much about a part of history I knew very little about. So thanks for taking us on this deep dive. I have a feeling we'll all be thinking about Abdelkrim and the Rifians long after this.
I hope so. Their story deserves to be remembered and shared. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit.
And to our listeners out there, thanks for joining us. We hope this sparked your curiosity. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the amazing world of history. You never know what incredible stories are waiting to be discovered.